If I can have your attention, please, while the first course is being served. Good evening, and welcome to the 34th Annual Induction Banquet for the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame. A very special evening for Michigan journalism and for a number of very special journalists whose work has made a difference in our state both during the past year and in many cases for the past several decades. My name is Ron Zwankowski, and I am a recovering journalist. I spent 40 years in the news business in Michigan, starting in broadcasting, then with the Associated Press in Detroit and in Lansing, followed by about 30 years with the Detroit Free Press. I was honored to be among the inductees into the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame a few years back. And for those of you who are joining the club this evening, this very special club, lest you get too full of yourselves about this honor, I always like to remind you that only one small typo separates being inducted from being indicted. I was a little surprised when I first walked in here and saw everybody high-fiving each other, and then I remembered it's Palm Sunday. It's going to be a long night. The Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame is especially grateful to Michigan State University for organizing and hosting this annual event and for being home to the Journalism Hall of Fame. Recognizing the best in our profession becomes even more important at a time when so many people, from the highest levels of government to the lowest rungs of social media, dismiss the news media as the enemy of the people. Those of you who practice journalism and hew to its ethical standards know that nothing is further from the truth, and that in the end, the truth always comes out, although sometimes not until after deadline. We have McCree winners. We need one representative from each of the McCree award-winning entries on the podium. All of the winners will be called up eventually. We just need one representative from each of the McCree winners here. To officially welcome you this evening, it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Lucinda Davenport, director of the MSU School of Journalism, and for a decade now, also the chair of the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame. I have been informed that after 10 years in this position, Dr. Davenport will soon be stepping aside as director of the School of Journalism, although thankfully for all of us, she will be remaining at MSU as a journalism professor. She has been, and we expect she will continue to be, an advocate for good journalism and a pioneer in teaching about the ever-changing ways in which stories are told and information is delivered. So as you welcome her to the podium this evening, let your applause also say thank you for Dr. Davenport's years of bringing this event together, and more importantly, her years of dedication to journalism and to the hundreds of students who have learned about and begun to practice this profession right here at Michigan State University. And to recognize Dr. Davenport tonight, we have the special plaque thanking her for her contributions to journalism in Michigan and to the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame. Dr. Lucinda Davenport.
Well, how nice. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And we're doing well, we're going strong, and it was my choice. Just want to put that out there. So thank you. Well, this is an exciting night, and it's all about the great journalism that happens in Michigan. And Ron, thank you very kindly. You already took, frankly, a lot off my speech. And you know what? We just all thank you, because there was a lot I wanted to say, and thank you for doing that. Except for the Palm Sunday one. That was not my speech. But please permit me to say a few words about the Hall of Fame, its inductees, the spirit of journalism today, and also to thank a few folks. So welcome to a very special evening as we celebrate the 34th annual Great State of Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame. We also celebrate tonight the award winners of the Wade H. McCree Jr. Awards for the Advancement of Justice, and we'll hear about those more in a bit. The Hall of Fame was established to recognize those who have advanced the legacy of a free and responsible press and who have inspired others to improve the quality of the profession. It acknowledges the service and dedication of individuals whose distinguished contributions to the profession in their communities, region, and the state have earned them a place in the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame. Induction memorializes extraordinary and clearly outstanding careers. So tonight we honor 7 such distinguished professionals. And if you'll please stand and wave when I call your name, or just wave, just somehow we want to see you. So that would be Peter Brown, who is editor and publisher. Where are you? Thank you. You know, I found this in the hallway, but I don't think I'm going to need it. You know, it's like, all right. Mary Conway, automotive and business reporter. Kathy Barks Hoffman, investigative journalist. Sylvia Rector, who's food writer and restaurant critic, is being distinguished tonight, and her husband, Charles Hill, is here to represent Sylvia. Charles. John Schneider, reporter and columnist, over here to my left. Mary Schrader, photographer and picture editor, over here to my left as well. Vicki Thomas, city beat reporter and mentor. There she is. Oh, I see they moved the bar inside for it's closer for us. That's good. That's good. These professionals have made a significant impact on the journalism profession. They have been, and they continue to be, leaders in their field, earning the respect and admiration of their peers and inspiring other journalists. They have believed in the freedom of the press to report issues and events in a way that help people make good decisions to lead productive lives. And that they have also worked hard to focus a spotlight on company corruption, turn over the rocks of our public servants in government, reminding them of why they're in office, and also to publicly celebrate the good works and deeds of others in our communities. And each inductee has also believed in the exciting and evolving future of journalism, as these award winners have been a mentor to many students and also to young journalists. What a wonderful opportunity to gather here this evening and to have some fun and to support journalism in Michigan. I'd like to offer you a short history on the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame. Did I hear you sigh? I'm just kidding. It's that Palm Sunday one. It began as the Michigan Newspaper Hall of Fame and honored journalists from 1952 to 1968. If I didn't think you could take teasing, I wouldn't have done it. Okay. Then the committee was defunct for about 20 years. And in 1985, Dr. Stan Soffen, who was the director of MSU's School of Journalism at the time, went to the Michigan Press Association, talked with David Hayhow, whom we lost last year, about reviving the Hall of Fame. The committee today is made up of representatives from nonprofit and diverse journalism organizations from across the state, and any nonprofit journalism organization is encouraged to send representatives and to co-sponsor the Hall of Fame. Currently, these organizations include the Asian American Journalism Association, the Association of Women in Communications, Detroit Press Club, Department of Journalism for Central Michigan University, Detroit chapter of the National Association of Black Journalists, Detroit chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists, Individual Communicators Network, the Journalism Program at Wayne State University, Michigan Association of Broadcasters, Michigan Interscholastic Press Association, Mid-Michigan chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists, and the Michigan Press Association and Foundation. And Michigan State University. Apparently I left that off the list. Each organization has an equal vote in this process. So this induction banquet would not be possible, of course, without the efforts of all those organizations and their representatives. Would the Hall of Fame committee members please stand? There you go. Thank you. Although we are recognizing inductees, let us also please honor the Michigan journalists who were previously inducted into the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame. Some of these individuals have returned this evening, so would members of the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame please stand? Thank you. We also want to recognize our Hall of Fame members who are no longer with us, and as I have done every year, I ask that you please remember journalists who have given their lives or their freedom while trying to tell us what is happening in areas across the globe, such as Afghanistan, Syria, Algeria, and many other places. May 3rd is World Press Freedom Day. It focuses on the important role of media in democracy and elections. The website of the Committee to Protect Journalists lists the number of journalists since 1992 who have been killed, which is 1,338, and that means it's about 55 for every year that I've been reporting this to you. Plus 4 for 2019. Some of these journalists were murdered, others were killed on dangerous assignments or in the crossfire of combat. Also, right now, more than 251 journalists are imprisoned worldwide and 60 are missing globally. These are sometimes in countries that repress journalism. All of these journalists were covering beats such as politics, war, corruption, human rights, crime, culture, business, sports. Let us also reflect that it is compassionate, ethical, and highly professional journalists who cover the hard events, sometimes involving death and destruction, for example, of children and adults involved in school shootings. In the 12 months of last year, there were more than 40 school shootings incidents with multiple victims. And then there's so much more. But it's journalists who bring us this news, and they have hard jobs. We all have hard jobs. So please join me a moment in silence to honor those journalists who are no longer with us, but are also victims of disaster. Thank you. And please indulge me for a bit to talk about the industry. It is always evolving and has always been evolving. And we are in the midst of another exciting time. It's challenging, but it's exciting. A Politico headline said that Trump might be the best thing that's been happening to journalism for a while because people always want to know what he's going to do next. Also, our history lessons show us that fake news has always been around, sometimes called sensationalism, sometimes yellow journalism, or clickbait for social media, or it's people who do not understand media literacy. But fake news confirms the reason for professional journalism. And let's face it, muckrakers scare some people, and always have. The importance of good journalism, professional journalists, and the responsibilities of a free press in a democratic society are prominent topics. Public attention to the importance of good journalism is growing. And so it takes a village to make this evening a success. Many people are responsible for this event, and their names are listed in your program, but I'd like to especially thank Corrine Lubis. Is she here? Or she's outside still working on stuff? There she is. Thank you so much. She has been the lead in putting together tonight's induction banquet, and others have worked for her, with her, and thank you very much. Barb Miller, Joe Grimm, Rick Epps, and students Jamie, Michael, Laura, Bailey, and Evan. I work with great people. The Hall of Fame is a nonprofit, so our sponsors are very much appreciated. And this year, they are Martin Waymeyer and the Michigan Interscholastic Press Association. We have several students attending. These students aspire to the success of those whom we honor tonight. Students are the visionaries and leaders of tomorrow's journalism. So would those who sponsored meals for these students and also the students please stand? And they represent various colleges and universities in Michigan. So if you don't mind, if you donated a meal for a student, and if a student is here, thank you. We got to keep that future rolling, and we got to keep that future fed. All righty, so my part is over, and I will turn over the evening to the famous Ron Zwonkowski, who will be our great host for the evening. Ron was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2010 and was former president of the Michigan Press Association and now works for the Michigan Press Association Foundation, which, among other things, works hard to raise scholarships for journalism students and recognize great journalistic work. So thank you for working hard for the future of journalism. And while at the Detroit Free Press, Ron was a part of many national awards, including Pulitzer Prizes. So we're lucky to have him as our host for the evening. And thank you.
Dr. Davenport.
I had so much more to say.
I believe it was Dr. Davenport who first asked the question, how many editors does it take to change a light bulb? The answer is 3, 1 to change it and 2 to hold down the reporter who says it doesn't need changing. Next on our program this evening is the presentation of annual awards recognizing journalism that really made a difference in Michigan last year. The Michigan Press Association Foundation, which raises money each year for journalism scholarships, also sponsors the annual Wade McCree Advancement of Justice Awards. And here to present them this year from Milliman Communications and the MPA Foundation is Dirk Milliman. Dirk?
Thank you very much. As Ron said, my name is Dirk Milliman. I'm one of a vanishing breed. I publish a daily newspaper in print, on paper, 6 days a week in Three Rivers, Michigan. So thank you. And I just have to mention, Dr. Davenport, I love the Tiger Woods red for today that you were wearing. Yes, very nice. These are the 45th annual Wade McCree Awards for the Advancement of Justice. The Michigan Press Foundation presents them every year and has for about the last 5 years. The foundation was created in 1980 to further the interests of journalism in Michigan. Our mission is to serve the public interest by encouraging, fostering, and aiding improvements in the quality, vigor, and fairness of Michigan journalism for the free press in the state. The foundation also sponsors the Michigan Journalist of the Year Award and has given more than $300,000 in scholarships since 1990 by awarding 300 scholarships to journalism students at Michigan colleges and universities. The McCree Awards, the Wade McCree Awards for the Advancement of Justice, were named for Judge Wade H. McCree. Judge McCree was one of the most distinguished lawyers and jurists in Michigan history and a staunch advocate for equal rights and open, accountable government. McCree served as a circuit, federal, and U.S. appeals court judge, and from 1997 to 81 as Solicitor General for the United States. The coveted McCree Awards are based on the significance and informative level of the journalism, plus its impact on changing and improving the legal and law enforcement systems. The awards were determined by a panel of 4 judges representing law and the media, who independently reviewed more than 24 entries from across Michigan. This year's projects explained, examined, and exposed problems and important issues in law enforcement and the legal system. 4 winners have been named 2019 McCree Journalism Award winners. The winners are reporters Jim Schaefer and Gina Kaufman from the Detroit Free Press, okay. Yep, and everybody we have limited seating, but everyone who's involved gets to come up front to have their picture taken. Mr. Schaefer is up in the back. If we could give him a round of applause too, please. Their in-depth investigation was called "They Look Like Cops, But They're Not," and they're all over Michigan. They found that state agency in charge of law enforcement licensing neglected to regulate reserve officers, despite gaining the authority to do so 2 years earlier. The agency had left regulation up to local departments, never seeking to find out how such volunteers there were across Michigan, despite high-profile, headline-making incidents involving reserve officers, which we've all heard about. The investigation found there are more than 3,000 unlicensed civilians, some with histories including crimes, who are helping do police work across Michigan. The reporters found a felon had carried a gun and patrolled the Detroit enclave. The former leader of a hate group had volunteered with 2 departments in western Michigan, and a Flint Reserve officer ran a vigilante group that had once unlawfully restrained teenagers and held them at gunpoint. So thank you for your excellent work. The second award goes to reporters Alicia Anderson, John Wisely, Elaine Zankowitz, that's wrong, sorry about that, and executive video producer Brian Kaufman, who collaborated on a series that appeared in print and on the Detroit Free Press website called Tale of a Tape. 15-year-old Damon Grimes died when he crashed his all-terrain vehicle on a Detroit street while being chased by the Michigan State Police. Trooper Mark Bessner violated police policy by firing his taser at the young man from the moving patrol car, causing the teenager to lose control. The Free Press series went on to expose Bessner's troubled work history and his repeated questionable use of taser on young African-American men like Damon. Experts on law enforcement policy and procedures described the unprecedented nature of police firing a taser from a moving vehicle. A follow-up story and video revealed Bessner's actions during past traffic stops. Another story featured young men who claimed Bessner and his partner stunned them without justification. So congratulations on your award. Thank you. You want everybody to get some McCree Award in one picture? Okay. All right, so everybody that wins a McCree Award has to come back for one picture. All right, thank you. The next award goes to reporter Matt Mencarini of the Lansing State Journal for his coverage of Larry Nassar and the fallout at MSU after Nassar was exposed as a serial sexual abuser who had used his position as a campus physician to abuse women and girls for more than 20 years. Mencarini was able to build superb source relationships both with the survivors, the investigators, and the lead prosecutor on the case. The riveting, lengthy sentencing hearing in Ingham and Eaton counties drew international attention and provided the endpoint for most outlets' news coverage. This is an unconventional look inside the police investigation and prosecution and has drawn attention from law enforcement nationwide. Matt, congratulations. Is Matt here? Matt is not here. We'll clap for him anyway. And our fourth McCree award-winning group, lead defense reporter Kevin Dietz, TV and digital executive Ro Coppola, web reporter Derek Hutchinson, and Dave Bartkowiak of WDIV, and podcast producer Zach Rosen of Graham Media for their steady drumbeat of investigative news stories exposing the injustices within the Michigan Parole Board, which turned into national outrage and concluded with not only the parole of Richard Wersch Jr., prisoner, but the introduction and passing of law of Michigan House Bill 5377. The injustice of the Wersch Jr. case was so outrageous, Hollywood turned it into a saga, reported by WDIV TV Local 4, and it became a major motion picture starring Academy Award winner Matthew McConaughey, who is not with us tonight. So congratulations on your award. Thank you. Congratulations. Okay. So all of the McCree winners are to gather over here for a photo, please. And we'd also like to thank the Dykema Law Firm for sponsoring this year's McCree Awards. Back to you, Ron. Thank you.
Thanks, Dirk. I want to remind you all that the MPA Foundation also sponsors the Michigan Journalist of the Year Award, which comes with a $1,000 prize. The foundation also raises some of its money through an annual golf outing and dinner, which this year will be held at a course in Ann Arbor on Friday, May 17th. Still time to sign up for that, and plenty of time to enter in the Journalist of the Year. And you can find information about all of those things on the Michigan Press Association website, which is michiganpress.org. We are now going to take a break from the podium to allow you all to enjoy dinner and conversation before we begin the induction proceedings. And if you need something to chew on over dinner, remember the historian Russell Linz once said that every journalist has a great novel inside of him, and that's probably where it should stay. See you in about 25 minutes. If you are the husband, wife, partner, parent, child, other relative, or good friend of a journalist, if you have ever had your date night interrupted by a phone call from a source, if you have ever been kept waiting, stood up, or pissed off because you came in second place to a story, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we applaud you. In so many ways, you all, while not being journalists, have made journalism possible. My wife always tells me she knew she was married to a journalist when I sent her an anniversary card that said, "You are the who, what, where, and why of my life." We have a large class of inductees this evening, so for those of you who did not set your DVRs, I can't promise you're going to make Game of Thrones. It falls to me this evening to introduce each of our Hall of Fame inductees. I have crossed journalistic paths with all of them at one time or another, and there's no way that I can do them professional justice without keeping you all here until Tuesday. Just understand that each of them has posted a very impressive body of work. Just as important, each of them in his or her own way has also mentored many, many other journalists who have gone on to become such credits to this very essential profession. You can find the nuts and bolts of their resumes in your programs. I'll simply try to highlight a few things about each of them before they speak. We're going to take them in alphabetical order by last name, so those among the 7 whose last names come last, you just have to wait and hope nobody steals your best lines. Our first inductee this evening is, to my knowledge, the only member of the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame to have started her career at the Goshen Tomahawk. That was the student newspaper at her high school in Indiana, and I'm told that Tomahawk also describes her editing skills on deadline. California native Kathy Barks Hoffman came to Michigan by way of Indiana. She worked for 28 years as a reporter and editor for the Lansing State Journal, Detroit News, the Lansing Bureau of the Associated Press, which she managed for 17 years. Kathy's among the pioneers in Michigan of computer-assisted reporting. She shared her skills in that area with countless other reporters in Michigan throughout the Gannett chain and the AP. Kathy also has been a tireless advocate for open government in Michigan. Those who nominated Kathy for this honor this evening described her as fair and fierce in her reporting, and someone who, at a time when women were a notable minority in the Lansing media, earned the respect of her peers and the politicians she covered, not by trying to be one of the boys, but by sheer competence. A skilled sailor, I think it's safe to say that Kathy kept an even keel through some turbulent times in Michigan and always knew which way the winds were blowing. Welcome, please, Kathy Barks Hoffman.
Well, I had Lucinda convinced that really Hoffman's my last name, Barks is my maiden name that I use as a middle name, but looks like I get to go first after all, so that's not a problem. Good evening. It's wonderful to stand up here and look out at so many friends, family members, current and former coworkers, and of course those who acted as mentors during my career, people such as Charles Hill and Jennifer Carroll, Randy Barris and Paula Froke, Marcia Van Ness, and Joanna Firestone. It's especially impressive when I know really, as Ron noted, many of you would rather be home for Game of Thrones, but you're still here, so I'll try to be brief. I know from the time that I took my mother's suggestion to sign up for a journalism class in 8th grade that this is what I wanted to do. As my father reminded me this weekend, I forgot, but I worked for the Lincoln Junior High rail splitter, which is appropriate. So, at any rate, but like many shy, introverted kids, I like to write. Getting up the courage to ask people questions, that was a whole nother deal. So I came to look on my reporter's notebook as my shield, the badge of my profession that said, yep, I'm allowed to ask you about this. Those hundreds, perhaps thousands of reporters' notebooks took me a long way, and as my husband will say, they're still out in the garage, and he'd like to get rid of most of them. When I learned how to use a computer to dig through troves of data to find out which local middle schools had the most violent incidents, or who was getting the biggest break from the new state tax laws, I had another tool. And I had partners who helped me flesh out those computer-assisted stories, including Sue Nichols at the Lansing State Journal and Valerie Bashida at the Detroit News. Probably the most fun I had was being a loner one summer at USA's Today Money section, where I wrote about the economy, the auto industry, and the savings and loan scandal. I never did learn to write a decent story about the stock market, but I made a lot of good friends, and Washington is still one of my favorite cities. Like many of you, I've worn a lot of hats during my career, from police and fire reporter to farm editor, editorial writer, special projects reporter, and political reporter. I was even a business editor for a while at the Lansing State Journal. All of which helped prepare me for a job at the Associated Press, where you never know what you're going to be covering. Then Michigan Bureau Chief Charles Hill had to take a chance on hiring a Lansing correspondent who was never going to cover a single MSU football or basketball game, unlike all the other previous correspondents, including Ron, probably, right? But I had a lot of experience covering state government, and that apparently got me the job. Of course, that didn't mean I never covered sports. There was one Sunday afternoon when I dragged my husband and both of my sons over to a hastily called Nick Saban news conference at MSU, where the coach announced yet again that he had no intention of leaving MSU for the pros. And he didn't. He dumped us instead for LSU. Through national political conventions and the funerals of Rosa Parks and Gerald Ford, and all-night legislative sessions, and auto strikes, and countless news conferences with governors from Jim Blanchard to Rick Snyder, I loved being a journalist. I loved learning from journalists who shared their stories and their reporting tips with me. I loved the sense of being able to explain to people every day what was happening in their world. It was a calling, a mission, and a great adventure. It's why I'm still on the board of the Society of Professional Journalists Mid-Michigan chapter, which so kindly nominated me for this, and a member of the Michigan Coalition for Open Government. It's why I cheer every day for the job that many of you still do, because good journalism is vital. The rules I learned as a journalist still carry over to my life today. Be honest, be fair, be accurate, have integrity, and try to tell a good story. Thanks for all you do, and thanks to so many of you for being my friends along the way.
Thanks, Kathy. If there is a theme running through the material supporting Peter Brown's nomination to the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame, is that he made things better, and that includes people and publications, especially Crane's Detroit Business, where he was the first editor, and Automotive News, where he was a transformational figure as editor and publisher. From his early days as a newsman in the Upper Peninsula, where Peter quit a job over the unethical practices of a publisher, to his time as a City Hall reporter in Detroit, where he got a federal judge in hot water over racist comments, to his decades at Detroit's premier business and auto industry publications, Peter was known for unfailing ethics, organizational innovations, razor-sharp writing and editing, and a commitment to telling the stories of the people behind the news. GM doesn't do anything. Toyota doesn't do anything, Peter once told a reporter. Find the people behind those new cars, those new ad campaigns. Indeed, nominators for Peter Brown said anyone who perceived Crane's or Automotive News as publications of interest only to business or car people must never have read them. Peter Brown made them lively, colorful, informative, as well as regularly breaking news and telling those stories of the people behind the ideas and products. Peter Brown retired in 2013 after a 28-year career with Crane Publications, but his impact will be with us for many years to come. Please welcome Peter Brown.
Good evening, fellow enemies of the people. These are tough times for newspapers and for journalists everywhere. But we'll survive and thrive. People still respond to important stories well told in print or digitally. When I became editor of the Houghton Daily Mining Gazette, we still had an old reporter who liked flowery language, and he never wanted to use the same term twice in a story. So if he was writing about deer, the second reference would be those leathern folk. And regularly he wrote stories on copper prices, thinking he could bring back the copper country to its former glory. And the second reference on that would be the red ore. He carried this tick into his speech. One day he delighted everybody in the newsroom when he grabbed his speed graphic camera, and as he went out the door, there was a building going up in town, and as he went out the door, he said, "I'm going out to take a picture of an erection." We tried to make him speak more directly after that. The Mining Gazette eventually became one of the best small papers in the state. Joseph Pulitzer memorably declared, "Every reporter is a hope, every editor a disappointment." Those were the two jobs that I loved most in newspapering, being a reporter and being the editor. At Crane's Detroit Business, we had a writing seminar about positioning. What would be our angle on the end of the world? And there were given a couple of examples. In the Washington Post, it would be, "World ends may affect elections." And at the New York Times, of course, "End of the world hits third world hardest." One of our reporters suggested a financial angle, "World Files Chapter 11." But my own headline was, "Detroit Riverfront won't be redeveloped after all," which is the one we would have used because, after all, I was the editor. In preparing for a presentation, I asked my predecessor at Automotive News, Andy McGill, what the story would be for Automotive News. "Oh, that's easy," he said without even missing a beat. "World ends, dealers remain optimistic." Editors are important. So much information is now available for free. An algorithm can't really separate the truth from falsehood. Anybody can start a blog, especially people with an axe to grind. But it takes skill and dedication to ferret out the truth. John Scott, the longtime editor and owner of the Manchester Guardian, once said, "Comment is free, but facts are sacred." The critical role of the media is to find and report the facts and hold the powerful accountable, not just report alternative facts as though they're real. That's another word for lies. I owe a lot to Keith Crane, who hired me to start up Crane's Detroit Business and then at Automotive News. Keith is a great and honorable publisher dedicated to serving the reader first. When I became editor of Automotive News, we had a great staff. It reminded me of a quote from Bones McKinney, the legendary basketball coach at Wake Forest, who was asked what makes a successful coach. He told an audience, "When I was the golf coach here one year, I had for my players 6 sons of 6 golf professionals. The 6th man won a match by shooting a 66. One of the 6 was Arnold Palmer. Now you can coach boys like that." Automotive News had a lot of stars. Reporters like Kathy Jackson and Jason Stein. Reporters and editors like Ed Lapham, Mary Beth Vanderschaff, and Dave Versicle and Rick Johnson. Now you can edit people like that. I'm very proud to be inducted into the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame, but I'm prouder still to be surrounded by a family of great writers and communicators. My oldest son, Nick, is the editor and publisher of his own business-to-business website with 2 weekly newsletters. He's a terrific writer. My second son, Greg, is a social media expert with Fleischman Hillard. He's also a terrific writer. My third son, Doug, was cited in journalism school by the Columbia Journalism Review for a great investigation he did on a naming scandal for Kent State University's basketball court. After working as an investigative reporter for 2 alternative weeklies, he now is a communications associate with the ACLU of Oregon. While they're all great communicators, I sometimes think I may have to give them a workshop on using their handheld devices to actually talk to people. Answer the damn phone, boys. Jeez. And my wife, Maria Leonhauser, was an editorial writer and columnist for the Philadelphia Bulletin and a correspondent for both Time and People before veering off into public relations. She's now finishing her first novel. We all believe in journalism and the truth, and I thank the Hall for the great honor you've given me. Thank you.
Our next inductee, Mary Conway, is a Wisconsin native who came to Michigan by way of a TV station in Rockford, Illinois, and after a 3-year stint at WZZM-TV in Grand Rapids, settled into a 29-year run as a reporter for WXYZ-TV Channel 7 in Detroit. For many of those years at Channel 7, Mary was the station's main reporter and the only woman on assignment every day to the auto industry beat in Detroit. Perhaps because her dad's gas station depended for so many years on business from workers at a nearby Chevy plant, Mary never lost sight of the industry's impact beyond the plant gates and the office building. One auto worker at Chrysler at a plant facing closure described Mary Conway as the eyes and ears of the workers there with the information she gathered. But Mary's other award-winning work included difficult reporting on traumatic postpartum depression, particularly among the wives of foreign auto executives assigned to the United States. Her stories led to the startup of support groups for these women. Mary's legacy also includes an organization called SOAP, Save Our Adolescents from Prostitution, which was an outgrowth of her groundbreaking stories about teenage victims of sex trafficking. When she was not on the auto beat, Mary could be found wherever assignments took her, and she always delivered solid journalism, yet she also always managed to find the time to help other reporters in her newsroom learn the craft and make their work better. She made a difference on the air, in the newsroom, and in the community. Please welcome Mary Conway.
How fun is this? We get to cheer for the good guys for once. This is great. And it is wonderful to see so many old friends, old colleagues. I started at Channel 7 36 years ago this month and had a ball. I became John Gildersleeve's nightmare 36 years ago, my cameraman who's still shooting over there. I owe huge thank yous tonight. You were talking about we all have spouses that have been wonderful because journalism isn't something you do, it's something you live. And by God, we had fun living it. But my husband is here, my sister's here from Denver, she flew in with us. My Aunt Annie, who God knows has seen every up and down, is here. Some friends I met in Grand Rapids when I worked there 39 years ago are here tonight. How lucky am I? It used to drive the crews crazy. I'd come in and go, we're gonna have a great day because I am the luckiest person alive. And most of those days were fabulous, but today I feel particularly blessed to see all of you, to be able to be here, to have people I love dearly here with me. I have to thank Jerry Hodak, the nicest guy with the best hair in the world, and Megan Saunders. They're the ones that submitted my nomination and stuck with it and really were my champions and heroes, and I will owe them forever. They're wonderful people, the whole Hodak family. They're all here tonight, and how blessed am I that through the years, I've made wonderful friends that stuck with me. An inductee already, Cheryl's a member, she's here tonight. Glenn Barr, Mike Murray, the station manager's here. Bob Giles, he's also in the Hall of Fame. I worked with wonderful people and was blessed every day to do it. Friends from Ann Arbor that are here tonight as well. So you look at the lives we lead and the blessings that came every day. You may not have realized it at the time, but we were so lucky. I'm lucky to come in tonight with somebody like Vicki Thomas, who I love dearly. We spent a lot of times at a lot of stories. And I think what that says, you have two people that work daily journalism that are here tonight. It talks about the importance of journalism every day. Good journalism can happen every day, and it is happening, and we need to support that. It is imperative through mentoring, through supporting scholarships, every step of the way through teaching good journalism. Cheryl's a teacher now, and Beth Conrad is still teaching. We need good students. We need to encourage them and bring them into the profession. It is so important that we foster good journalism and keep it happening. It's Walter Cronkite who once said, journalism is what we need to make democracy work. I believe that, and it's because of good journalism happening every day that democracy can work. And it's so important that we foster that every day and keep good journalism happening on every platform, in television, print, social media. We do need editors on every form. But when you look at the lives that we've been blessed to lead, I'm so honored that people throughout Michigan trusted me to tell their stories. People let us into their homes, for God's sakes, every day and talk to us. I worked for And I worked with people like Mike Murray, the station manager, who believed in funding those stories. Get out there and tell those stories. Go around and talk to the workers. Get the story that matters to them. Scripps stood for giving a voice to the voiceless, and they let us do that every day. You know, one of the things that you talked about, the story for the Japanese woman who killed her baby at Sumikoga. My eldest sister killed herself through postnatal depression. It was important to me that we make a difference. And thank God I had the platform to do that. We have power to help people every day. And it is so important that we keep that happening, because in every level, we can make a difference. We were able to right some wrongs. We got some things changed over that 30 years at 7. We keep viewers informed every day, whether it's a plant closing or a new contract or what it's going to mean. God, it'd be fun to cover this year's contracts. It's going to be a big one. But you know, we had a lot of fun along the way. And for that, I will be forever grateful. Thank you.
I hope you all enjoyed the meal we were served tonight, and I'm sure that Sylvia Rector would have known exactly what to say about it, because food was her beat for 17 years of a 4-decade journalism career. And if you think that that sounds trivial compared to the standard journalism menu of crime, government, business, politics, I would only ask, did you eat today? Are you going to eat tomorrow? If you think about things that are utterly indispensable, food is right up there, maybe next to your smartphone. And Sylvia brought news about food to your breakfast table and then to your video screen as the innovative restaurant critic and food writer of the Detroit Free Press. Sylvia is a native of the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. She came to Michigan by way of journalism gigs in Tennessee, North Carolina, Connecticut, Washington, Texas, and Minnesota. She was a talented reporter and editor in some very tough markets before applying her journalism to food here in Michigan. Sylvia was knowledgeable, she was rigorous, she was fair, and this is on a beat where people take very seriously and very sensitively the things that you write about. How many food critics are so well regarded that they are asked to judge the National Pillsbury Bake Off? Sylvia was also among the first Free Press reporters to work on a feature-length video, and in addition to her many words that she writes, she may have been one of the few people who took pictures of her food that other people actually wanted to see. Sylvia retired in 2015. Sadly, she was diagnosed with cancer and died the following year, but if you want to see just part of her legacy, check out the websites and the walls of the many Michigan restaurants, pizza parlors, even burger joints that Sylvia visited during her years at the Free Press. You will find her work very proudly displayed alongside their menus. Accepting the award tonight on Sylvia's behalf is her husband, Charles Hill.
Thank you, Ron. Sylvia would have been very pleased to be honored along with these inductees tonight, especially Kathy and Mary, who she knew and admired. I want to thank the Hall of Fame committee and everyone who made this happen, including people who wrote passionate letters of support and her friends at the Free Press who gathered clips, videos, and photos. I can't name everyone, but I want to thank Pat Anstatt and Maureen McDonald for suggesting the nomination, and the letter writers, including ones I'll mention later, but also Holly Griffin and Sue Solaski from the Free Press and Kate Lawson from the Detroit News. I know Sylvia also would want to thank all of her colleagues who made her success possible, editors who gave her the support and freedom she needed, and a legion of co-workers and friends, including reporters, copy editors, photographers, and more. Here's some of the comments from some of the letters. Roy Bodie, former Dallas Times-Herald editor-in-chief, wrote, "There were dozens of women in the Times-Herald city room, but Sylvia was among the first to become part of its upper management tier. She belonged there. She had the courage never to shrink from the challenge. She has took her seat at the table, and in short order, she proved to be a smart, tireless, aggressive journalist who knew her way around newspapers and could wrangle breaking news like a Texas cowgirl could sort cattle." In Minnesota, Sylvia led the Star Tribune St. Paul newsroom when the paper took on its next-door neighbor by taking Minneapolis out of its name and establishing a 15-person operation in St. Paul. Retired reporter Joe Kimball told the Star Tribune, "We felt like troops landing on the beach. It was a landmark moment for the paper, and Sylvia was our field general." Former Star Tribune editor Tim McGuire wrote in his letter, "Sylvia was a hard-driving editor who insisted on excellence and got it. She developed stories, but more importantly, she developed outstanding reporters. It always seemed to me that Sylvia bled news. That's why it's so surprising to me when I heard she had reached great heights as a food critic. Too many food critics I have known have been journalistic wannabes, not Sylvia. Sylvia Rector was an outstanding editor in Minneapolis." In Michigan, chefs James Regato of the restaurant Mabel Gray, Luciano Del Signore of Bacco, and Benjamin Meyer, formerly of Iridescence, all wrote letters. They talked about the respect that Sylvia earned because of her knowledge, high standards, and how she did the job. Many said Sylvia was a role model. Nicole Avery Nichols, here tonight, urban affairs editor at the Free Press, wrote, "Sylvia Rector was a trailblazer. For a whole generation of female journalists, myself included, Sylvia was a mentor, a coach, an example of what is possible and what good journalism demands. Sylvia diligently and methodically carved out a career so that the rest of us could fall in line behind her." Former Free Press managing editor Tom Flatting said Sylvia was, quote, "a mentor to a generation of Free Press journalists, including me." He said Sylvia was a huge help as a fellow editor when he started at the paper. "She was the one who early on took me aside and in that wonderfully direct yet kind way told me what I was screwing up. She was right, of course. Fortunately for me, I listened. More fortunately, I watched her, how she conducted herself in brainstorming sessions, how she worked with reporters, how she was both respected and liked, and man, did I learn." He said that as a writer, quote, "Sylvia was one of the Freep's distinctive voices. She built Restaurant of the Year into a franchise." Her colleagues described how she met the challenges facing the newspaper industry, from taking thousands of photos to shedding her anonymity so she could make public appearances. Former Free Press managing editor Julie Topping wrote, "She transformed herself, and in the process, she transformed Free Press restaurant coverage and scared every food blogger to death. She needed to be first, and she needed to get it right, because she was the authority, and everyone in town knew it. She had relationships with chefs, knowledge about food, wisdom about trends, and overall respect, because she was so thorough and so on top of dining in Detroit." Nicole Avery Nichols wrote, "In 2015, in the midst of the online media revolution, Sylvia Rector's digital audience numbers for her annual Restaurant of the Year coverage rivaled those of the auto show. In the Motor City, where autos are king, that fact was astonishing. It was an indicator of how popular Sylvia Rector's journalism had become. Primarily based on the strength of her work and reputation, the Free Press created an unprecedented sponsorship agreement with the Metro Detroit Chevy dealers for a dining series and sponsored restaurant content." I'll end with one more quote from Free Press columnist Rochelle Riley, who's here tonight. "She wasn't a celebrity. She was a reporter's reporter who wrote about the food business. That made her a business writer, a culture writer, a food writer, a narrative specialist who wrote about the people who cook for us. God, she was good. What she gave this community, this state, is lasting. Her legacy will remain not just in the kitchens of Detroit's best known and least known restaurants, but in the kitchens of homes across the state." Thank you all.
Our next inductee was almost a man of letters. Instead, after a brief try at following in his father's footsteps as a mail carrier, John Schneider decided to become a man of words. Many words and sentences and paragraphs. John retired in 2012 after 35 years at the Lansing State Journal, 24 of them as a columnist who one former editor said was clearly the voice of our newspaper. A Detroit native, John broke into journalism as a copy boy at the Detroit Free Press and then was a reporter at the Daily News in Sydney, Ohio, where it is worth noting that John's wife, Sharon, was then a reporter for a rival Ohio newspaper, and the two of them were once tear gassed together while covering a labor riot. A true reporter, John later got inside information about the riot from the local sheriff, and he refused to share it with Sharon, who married him anyway. And then later on, John forced the sheriff to resign by exposing him for spending county money on personal needs. So this is like a trifecta of journalism. As a journalist whose beat was the people of mid-Michigan, John lived up to the old adage of afflicting the comfortable and comforting the afflicted. In one column, he shamed his own publisher for charging readers for a special section. In many others, he wrote about real people with real needs, and his readers came through time and time again with real help. And that includes an East Lansing brother and sister whose lives were forever changed in 1988 when State Journal readers who were responding to one of John's columns donated enough money for the implants that enabled that brother and sister to hear for the first time. John modestly says, "I was just lucky enough to have the ability to help people and get paid for it." Sure, John, we all did it for the money. Anybody who has ever written a regular column knows it doesn't come easy. Some days it feels like pulling teeth. On good days, it's like opening a vein. But columnists also know that if people connect with you, they will care about what you have to say. And for 24 years, John Schneider was the most connected guy in town. Welcome, please, John Schneider.
Thank you all. I'll begin my thank yous with a Detroit Cody High School English teacher who somehow managed to plant the seed of a writing life on exceedingly rocky soil. I think it was the first time in my life I had ever heard the word journalism, and it took a while for that seed to incubate, but eventually it bloomed. I also want to thank the Lansing State Journal for giving me a platform for all those years, and more importantly, the freedom to use it. I will say that in all that time, I was never instructed what to write or what not to write, and I was always extremely proud of that, and I must give credit to the State Journal for that. I'll thank Judy Putnam, who is the instigator of all this, and who spent many hours helping me plow through the State Journal archives, looking for my clips to use for this nomination. The co-conspirator, my wife Sharon, who used her artistic hand to shape the whole thing. Hugh Leach, who is the ramrod. If you ever need anything done, Hugh Leach is your man. He was determined to get this nomination wrapped up by Thanksgiving, and by God, he did. There was an old-time editor at the Lansing State Journal named Frank Han, God rest his soul, who used to say, "Give me 3 Hugh Leaches and 2 pots of coffee, and I'll put out this whole damn paper." All right? And I think if you would have thrown in a fifth of Bushmills, he would have delivered it too. I can't not mention my friend Richard Prangley, who there was a time in the newspaper business where an average citizen could walk into a newspaper, get into the newsroom, and with a little finesse and luck, sit down and talk to a reporter. 9 times out of 10, it turned out to be a bum steer, but every now and then, you struck gold. Well, in 1980, January 1980, Richard Prangley walked into the newsroom of the State Journal, and I'll never forget it. He was there, and one of the editors, Marcia Van Ness, greeted him at the door, listened to a little bit about what he was saying, and then kind of looked around for a reporter. I was the slowest to duck. She introduced me to Richard. He had a big, thick pile of papers. Those were usually the worst ones, with the big, thick pile of papers. But Richard told me that he had been improperly locked up, basically, for 15 years of his life at the Coldwater State Home and Training School, which was a place where they put uneducable people. Richard had minor learning disabilities, but certainly nothing that would warrant what happened to him. From age 6 to age 21, he was locked up at Coldwater. He received no academic training at all. He was judged to be uneducable. They said he was incapable of learning anything. His diagnosis in writing was low-grade imbecile. That's what his actual diagnosis was. And for 15 years, he wallowed in Coldwater, was kicked out at age 21 to fend for himself, figured out that if he was going to change anything, it would be in Lansing, came to Lansing, came to the State Journal. I wrote a front-page story about him, which led to many, many other front-page stories, and eventually a book. He went to work for the state in the mailroom. Governor Milliken felt so bad about what had happened to Richard that he created an entire job classification strictly for Richard that allowed him to work there. He worked there for 30 years, retired, owned his own home now, pays taxes, became a productive citizen, plus an advocate for the developmentally disabled. It's just the most incredible story I'd ever heard. Stand up, Richard.
Our Creator made it happen. God had my back. Helped me to be able to be a sample to many others have the same experience I have. How can we make things work for other people?
Well, and that may be true, but Richard deserves 99% of the credit for his persistence, his refusal to be bitter, and his determination to make things better for other people. So with that, I'll thank the letter writers who helped me out, the committee members who picked me, and all of you who came here today. Thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you. See you again. Next among our inductees is our second Mary from Wisconsin. I'm thinking Mary must be a popular name in Wisconsin, probably because it rhymes with dairy. This honor goes to Mary Schrader. For 40 years, a photographer, a photo editor, a counselor, a mentor, and inspiration at the Detroit Free Press, and if I may add, an old friend from my own days there. Mary joined the Free Press as an intern in 1979, and starting in 1983 was the first, and for a long time the only, woman photographer assigned full-time to cover sports by a major daily newspaper. She was on the job at the World Series in 1984 when her keen eye captured that famous image of Kirk Gibson leaping to celebrate his game-winning home run. And Mary, the following year, was a plaintiff in a successful lawsuit that forced the Detroit Lions to allow equal access for reporters and photographers regardless of gender. Like Kathy Hoffman, Mary is a skilled sailor, so she knows about shifting winds and unpredictable seas, and perhaps that's how and why, in spite of some physical limitations in recent years, Mary remained a force for good journalism at the Free Press until her retirement last year. As an editor who worked many nights with Mary, I can attest firsthand to her passion for pictures that tell a story, for accuracy in every caption and headline, and to her patience in guiding young photojournalists and old editors on the right path to great work. One iconic image does not capture Mary's career any more than one story or column or edition can sum up the careers of any of the other people here tonight. You have to look at the big picture. And for Mary Schrader, this giant frame shows not just talent, but also integrity, principles, courage, patience, and perseverance against considerable challenges. It's a lot to capture, but for Mary, it's all in the big picture. Mary Schrader.
Okay. All right, yeah. All right.
Radio reporter.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. First off, thank you to the committee for selecting me to be in this Journalism Hall of Fame. I never expected it, this honor, and very much appreciate it. Okay, now let me see. Being a photographer, I have pictures.
Oh, wow. Sweet.
Oh, this is the last one. There, okay. I was 21 years old, and 2 weeks after starting an internship in photo at the Detroit Free Press, I photographed Mother Teresa when she opened a convent at 12th and West Grand Boulevard, the site of the 1967 riots in Detroit. A few years later, I take one of the most iconic pictures in Michigan history, Kirk Gibson as he celebrates one of 2 home runs in Game 5 from the 1984 World Series against the San Diego Padres. And, I might add, not any of the boys got it. Not Sports Illustrated, not AP, not UPI, zip, zero, and zilch. Well, I'm sorry, UPI got it, but it was from the waist up in black and white. A few years later, I had my name in lights for a month in Times Square in New York for a picture I took from a book, At the Rim, where women photographers photographed women's college basketball for a season. And for a season. I also shoot pictures out of my window in Lafayette Park near downtown Detroit. I grew up in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, where we had a 2-lane highway to Green Bay and Milwaukee. Computers were non-existent in my world, much less the internet. I started taking pictures at age 9 with the Kodak X15 camera, and then I knew I wanted to be a photographer. Oh yeah, that was Red Wings playoff games. That's Mark Howe. Iserman first Stanley Cup at the White House from that series. I had a curiosity and a thirst for knowledge. I want to know everything, and then I want to share it with the world. As a photographer, I have a front row seat to history. In high school in the early 70s, I read that women could not be newspaper photographers. That didn't stop me. I graduated from Ohio University in June '79 with a degree in photography, and my internship that summer was with legendary chief photographer Tony Spina and the Free Press. I did something right because after a month, Spina hired me as a staff photographer, and I didn't leave the paper until January 2nd of this year, not last, a career of almost 40 years. I started shooting sports in the early 80s and found it to be exciting. I would walk into a room and be the only woman. In 1985, the Free Press filed a lawsuit on my behalf to allow women in the Lions locker room. It was agreed that there would be equal access for everyone. I love the creativity of shooting pictures that working for a major paper afforded me. In the mid-90s, I started shooting general assignment. In 2000, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, the kind where I slowly go downhill. By 2008, I became a picture editor, still shooting pictures occasionally. As a picture editor, I choose pictures for the paper, coach reporters in how to take pictures, and if they were smart, they followed my directions. I was in charge of Travel with a D, where we had readers submit their vacation pictures and came up with very polite answers to respond to them as to why their pictures weren't chosen. And don't pity me because I have MS. It is part of me, and I see life from a very different perspective. My legs choose not to work, but my brain and mouth definitely work. At work, I was not seen as handicapped at all. I am joining a prestigious list of Free Press photographers already in the Hall of Fame. Tony Spina, Hugh Granum, David Gilkey, and Julian Gonzalez, who's here tonight. We use our talents to show you your world. We also affect change in the stories we produce. The Hall recognizes longevity, consistency, and quality. Future generations can learn from our body of work that is timeless. And thank you to Kathy Kalashevsky, Director of Photo and Video at the paper, for spearheading my nominations. And thank you to the Hall of Fame Committee for this wonderful honor.
Now we go from visual to audio. There is in Detroit an all-news radio station that stops what it's doing every 10 minutes to tell you what has changed in the past 10 minutes regarding traffic and weather. Usually not much. But in between the traffic and weather, you are likely to hear the clear, cool voice of Vicki Thomas telling you what's really changed. At City Hall, police headquarters, somewhere out in the neighborhoods. The City Beat reporter for WWJ News Radio 95, Vicki has been scouring the streets of Detroit for news since 1991 and delivering it in 30 and 60-second bursts that are factual and fair. I remember once doing a TV talk show with Vicki. I think it was about elections. And while the rest of us pundits were prattling on and pontificating, Vicki's replies were always 30 or 60 seconds. And we knew she was done talking because she always said, Vicki Thomas, News Radio 95, Detroit. 27 years of award-winning Detroit broadcast journalism would certainly be enough to warrant a Hall of Fame status, but with Vicki, there's so much more. She has been a union leader, a champion for newsroom diversity. She's a frequent speaker at Detroit schools about careers in journalism. Vicki started a scholarship and intern program for college students who are pursuing broadcast news careers, and she was a driving force in bringing the big NABJ convention to Detroit last year. Vicki Thomas knows news and she knows Detroit, and Vicki also knows that somewhere in one of those schools or scholarship programs there may be another Vicki Thomas who needs some direction or a guiding hand. Vicki Thomas will always find the time to help because she can get more done in 30 or 60 seconds than most people do in a week. Please welcome Vicki Thomas.
Now I feel like I have to keep this to 30 or 60 seconds. That's not fair. But look, I guess I'm last and charged with taking you out on a high note. Literally. I'm going to do something that I rarely do. So here we go. We are family. I've got all my families with me. We are family. All right, I'm going to spare you the rest because, as you can see, I did not miss my calling. I can broadcast, I can write, but I cannot sing. But I wanted to share those lyrics because they have meaning to me, especially tonight. And I have so many families. I'm blessed to have so many. And each one of my families is represented here tonight. My biological family, the patriarch, my dad, I call him Papa Joe, Joe Thomas. He will be 90 years old this year. And guess what? At 89 years old, he's still working. So if you ever wonder where I get my work ethic, it's from my dad. They made the trip from LaGrange, Illinois. My stepmom, Corrine, my brother JR, a host of cousins from Illinois, Bessie May, who actually is 90 years old, and she's been hanging out with us for a couple of days now, partying last night and everything. My cousin Henry Thomas, same thing, just hanging tough with us. They actually threw a surprise party for me last night, so if the voice sounds a little harsh, it is. It was a great night. They were really cunning. They got me really good. I told them they broke the internet because of all the posts they did of my mouth being wide open when I opened the elevator door and saw all these people. But the internet was actually down. Facebook, Twitter, I blamed all of those folks for that. Also representing my mom's side of the family is my Aunt Loretta. She made the trip from Jacksonville, Florida to be here. My Aunt Loretta. Always been an inspiration. She retired from the Detroit public school system after a very prestigious career. Thank you so much for being here. And I guess the one sad note that I would feel right now or have to bring up is that my mom and stepdad aren't here, but I know that they're looking down from heaven, proud, smiling, maybe doing a chest bump, I don't know. But I want to publicly acknowledge them for giving me a great childhood, for their guidance, for their love and support. And my oldest sister is here, Josie Thomas. She's here. We love each other so much, we live next door to each other. Yes. She's been like a second mom, really, to me. She's always supported me, even behind my mom's back. When I wanted to model, she'd sneak me off, and but I just love her to pieces. And my other family members that are here, if you could stand and be acknowledged. I have a host of cousins, as I said, that came in. Stand up, don't be shy. And my WWJ family. Yes. Our fearless leader is here, Rob Davidek, and I want to publicly thank him for giving me the space to do what I do, to chase the stories that I want to chase. I have to chase some of his stories sometimes, but I do it anyway. But my colleagues, we feed off of each other. I mean, we have a driven staff, and for that all-news operation, you have to be driven. If you can't handle the pressure, you have to get out of the kitchen, because sometimes it can be a pressure cooker, but we deliver the news, and you listen because you want to know if there's been any changes 10 minutes later. So can my WWJ family stand up? We have a host of reporters here. Pat Sweeting, who retired from WWJ. And then there's my SAG-AFTRA family, represented by Jane Bauer tonight. We had our Norma Ray moments together a while back, fighting to bring in the union at WWJ, and guess what? We won. And I enjoy representing my colleagues. Some don't want to speak up. I'm happy to do it. They'll tell you, I think Rob would say, yeah, she's happy to challenge me. But, it's just something about my DNA that that's what I do. I believe in fairness and, doing what's right. And I'm led by the Spirit to do what the Spirit wants me to do. So, Jane, thank you so much for your support. We've been in the trenches, and I love you dearly. Thank you for being here tonight. And my NABJ family, what can I say? Wow. Led by our fearless leader, Vince McCraw, the chapter president in Detroit. He helped me host that convention along with the chapter members. I think we knocked it out of the park. And I want to acknowledge a couple of board members, Georgette Johnson. She was one of the co-conspirators at last night's surprise party. Who else? Alicia Nails is on the Detroit board. And I also have to acknowledge Alicia for nominating me. Alicia, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you. I thank you. And I just have to acknowledge NABJ for the work that it does. I was on the national board for 5 years. It was my life, along with WWJ, doing the two simultaneously. I think I'm still suffering from exhaustion. But one of the things that I'm passionate about is students. And NABJ, I started my career being a member of NABJ. I started that scholarship that you mentioned in the name of Bill Black, who is a Hall of Famer and worked for a competing station, because Bill mentored me. He mentored me. So when I talk about my families, I thought it's significant because I didn't really want to stand here and talk about myself, because really I am a representation of all these people. And it was important for me to acknowledge them. And in terms of mentoring students, my 5 years on the board, I was in charge of over 20 student and professional chapters, including the chapter here at Michigan State University. And some of these students have gone on to do amazing things. That's been one of my greatest joys. We actually, when President Obama was in the White House, he had a White House Reporter Day for students, and they cut off the application process well ahead of when they were supposed to. We had to call the White House because this student who wanted to apply, when she hit apply, it would reject her application. And she is now a student out in California. She was front and center when Barack Obama came out to speak to the students. So those are the things that I'll remember, you know, that make a difference to me, being able to encourage students like young Kayla back here. Kayla, stop picking your arm. What are you doing back there? She interviewed me earlier, and I told her that I once ran into someone when I was a student pursuing journalism, and I said, wow, I'm gonna be a journalist. And this person was an anchor in Detroit, and he looked at me and said, poor baby, why? And I'm thinking, well, wow, thanks for the pep talk. So it's my mission really to encourage these kids, and I tell them, yes, it is a competitive business. What isn't competitive these days? If you're serious about it, go for it, do it, and we should all encourage them. My other mission, as you mentioned, is diversity. I've been a champion of diversity. I once was in a newsroom and a non-minority came up to me and said, why do we need NABJ? I said, look around. She looked around that newsroom and said, oh. And the fact that I, in 2019, am the first African-American radio broadcaster to be inducted. Let that sink in for a second. Let that sink in. 2019. Wow. So I challenge the managers in this room, my boss, Rob David A. Mike, I see you don't hide. Redouble your efforts when it comes to diversity. Do it, it's important. Diversity matters. So I know I started out on a weird note for you and I ended on a serious note, so I took you like on a roller coaster ride, but it's all good. I really want to thank the Hall of Fame. I want to thank everyone who wrote a letter recommending me. Many are in this room tonight, Hall of Famers, Rochelle Riley, Luther Keith, Jerome Vaughn. I know I'm missing somebody. Who am I missing? Well, you know who you are if I missed you. And just the selection committee, thank you all so much for deeming my work worthy. It's a high honor when it comes from your colleagues. So thank you all very much, and thank you for being here tonight.
How about one more round of applause for the class of 2019? To close out this very special evening, may I say that I used a couple of times tonight the term deadline, which I know is almost outmoded in today's online media where information pours in all the time, sometimes from professional journalists and often from people with phones, people who have no concept of context, balance, ethics, or standards. Just because everybody is armed doesn't mean they know how to shoot. But this gives rise to the newsroom question, do we want to be first or do we want to be right? And every editor I ever worked for has said we should be both. But those who practice journalism know that is not always possible. And faced with that choice, and you all will be, may I urge that we always come down on the side of being right. The future of journalism is actually in its past, in being accurate, fair, and credible, as all the great journalists, including those that we honored here tonight, have shown us how to be. As a prize-winning author, Celeste Ng, once put it, journalists chronicle our everyday lives. They reveal truths and information that the public deserves to know, and they provide a record for posterity so that future generations can learn from our mistakes and improve upon our achievements. So keep up your good work. Just make sure it is good work. Thanks for coming tonight. Drive home safely.